$100. You've spent that on a weekend without thinking about it. A dinner out, a few impulse buys, a subscription you forgot to cancel. It disappears, and you don't even really feel it go. And yet that same amount, that same $100, sitting quietly in the right place, doing almost nothing except existing month after month, becomes something that most people genuinely cannot wrap their mind around until they've lived it. This isn't a story about getting rich, not exactly. It's a story about what happens to a person, not just their account balance, when they commit to something small for an uncomfortably long time. And that distinction matters more than most financial content will ever admit. Let's say you're 24, maybe 27, maybe 32, and you're watching this thinking it's already too late, which is its own kind of thought worth examining. You decide, almost on a whim really, to put $100 into an index fund at the start of every month. You don't tell anyone, it doesn't feel significant, it's barely a decision, it feels more like a small inconvenience. The first few months, nothing happens. That's the part nobody talks about honestly. Nothing happens, and that's the entire point. And it's also the reason most people quietly stop. Month 1, you have $100 in an account. The market does something irrelevant. Maybe it goes up a little, maybe it dips, and you feel slightly sick about it, even though the amount is small enough that it shouldn't matter emotionally. But it does. That's interesting, actually. The emotional response doesn't scale with the dollar amount the way you'd expect. Even a small loss feels personal. Month 3, you have around $300, give or take whatever the market did. It's not exciting. Nothing about this is exciting yet. That's the truth of early investing. It requires you to find meaning in something that offers you almost no feedback, no reward, no signal that you're doing something right. This is where the psychology starts to matter more than the math. There's a version of this where you stop. Most people do, not because they can't afford the $100, but because the absence of visible progress is its own kind of signal. The brain interprets nothing is happening as this isn't working, and the brain is wrong, spectacularly wrong, but it doesn't feel wrong, it just feels like honesty. Around month 6, something small shifts, not in the numbers, in you. You start to think of that $100 differently. It's not a sacrifice anymore, not quite. It's become a kind of habit the same way brushing your teeth is a habit, not meaningful in any single moment, but quietly constitutive of something larger. You're building a relationship with future you, and the terms of that relationship are getting clearer, even if you couldn't articulate them yet.
You might, around this time, read something about compound interest. The math, laid out plainly, will seem too good to be true. Historically, broad stock market indexes have returned something in the range of 7 to 10% annually over long periods. Not guaranteed, not linear, not predictable in any given year, but statistically persistent over decades. At that rate, money roughly doubles every 7 to 10 years. Not the money you put in, the total value, including all the growth that grew. The first time you actually understand that, really understand it, not just intellectually nod at it, something happens in your chest that's hard to name. It's not excitement, it's more like quiet alarm. Because you realize that the $100 from month 1 isn't just worth $100, it's working, slowly, invisibly. And the 100 from month 2 is working, and so on, each contribution layering underneath the ones before it, each earning returns that then earn their own returns. The thing most people don't feel in their bones until it's too late to fully benefit from is that the process doesn't work linearly. The early years are slow in a way that feels discouraging. The later years are fast in a way that feels almost unfair. Year 2. You've put in around $2,400. Your balance, depending on what the market did, might be somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,500, maybe more. On the surface, that's almost nothing. You're aware of that. But something subtler has happened alongside the balance growing. Your relationship to money has quietly shifted. You've started noticing spending differently, not in an obsessive way, not in the way people talk about when they cut out lattes and track every dollar. It's softer than that. You just find yourself occasionally pausing before spending in a way you didn't before. A small internal moment. Is this worth more to me now or later? Sometimes the answer is now. That's fine. But the fact that the question exists at all is a change in identity you didn't plan for. That's the part the financial calculators don't show. Year 5. Something here genuinely surprises people. The account has grown, yes, but the more interesting shift is social. You're at a point in your life where your peers are making various financial decisions: new cars, bigger apartments, trips that stretch budgets, lifestyle upgrades that arrive right on cue with income upgrades, and you feel the pull of that, strongly sometimes. This is one of the real friction points, not math, not discipline, friction between who you're becoming financially and what you're surrounded by socially. The invisible pressure of keeping pace. The quiet discomfort of watching people around you seem to enjoy money more visibly while you're doing something that currently looks like nothing. Nobody throws a party for the person quietly contributing to an index fund every month. And yet, Year 5, assuming roughly 7% average annual returns over that period, your consistent contributions have built something in the range of $7,000, maybe slightly more, from $6,000 invested. That gap, that distance between what you put in and what's there, is small, but it's real. And for the first time, you can feel the mechanism working not just in theory, but in fact. The growth is no longer zero. Something changes. Year 10. This is where the story starts to become something else entirely. You've contributed around $12,000 total. Your balance, historically speaking, could reasonably sit somewhere around $17,000 or $18,000. Possibly more, possibly less. Markets are not predictable in any individual window. But the direction, over a decade, has been upward, and the gap between what you put in and what's there has widened in a way that feels genuinely strange the first time you look at it clearly. More than money, though, look at who you've become.
You've watched markets fall. You've watched your balance drop and resisted the impulse to sell. That resistance, quiet, unglamorous, repeated, is a skill, a deeply underrated one. Most people only discover it's a skill when they don't have it, when panic sells at the wrong moment and they watch the recovery happen without them. You've also made decisions over 10 years that the other version of you, the one who skipped this, didn't make. Not necessarily better decisions across the board, but different ones, more considered. You've built a habit of thinking in longer time frames, and that bleeds into other parts of life in ways that aren't easy to measure, but are completely real. Here is what nobody expects. The number, the balance, starts to feel less important than the system. You begin to understand that the monthly contribution isn't the point exactly. The point is what the monthly contribution represents: a vote, cast every 30 days for the version of your life that you want more than the version you could have right now. That reframing is quiet. It doesn't announce itself, but when it arrives, your relationship to the whole thing changes. It's no longer a sacrifice or a discipline or a goal. It's just what you do. The way some people just exercise, not because they're chasing a body, but because they've become someone who moves. Identity is doing the heavy lifting now, not willpower. Year 15. The account sits at somewhere between $35,000 and $45,000, historically plausible, depending on when you started and what the market did across those specific years. You've put in $18,000. The rest, roughly half the total, came from growth, from money making money while you were doing other things. This is the number that finally, viscerally explains what people mean when they talk about compounding, because you start to do the math forward instead of backward. If the account continues growing without you adding anything, just existing, just being there, it will double again roughly every 7 to 10 years at historical rates, not guaranteed, but plausible, which means the account does more for you in the next decade than you did for it in the last decade and a half combined. This is the tipping point, the moment when time starts working for you faster than you can work for yourself. And most people never reach it because they stop somewhere in the years when it felt like nothing was happening. There's something uncomfortable embedded in this story that's worth sitting with. The people who benefit most from this process are the ones who started before they felt ready, before they had extra money, before the amounts felt meaningful, before they fully understood what they were doing. They started small and imperfect, and the imperfect start turned out to matter enormously. Not because of the money they put in during those early months, but because of the time those early dollars accumulated. The person who starts at 22 and invests $100 a month for 40 years will end up at historical rates with a significantly larger balance than the person who waits until 32 and invests $200 a month for 30 years.
even though the second person invested nearly twice as much money. The decade of difference is worth more than the doubled contribution. That's not a field-judge statistic. It's actually a little distressing if you're honest about it, because it means the most valuable resource in this equation isn't money. It's the years you can't get back.
But here's the other side of that, and it matters just as much. Starting late is not the same as not starting. The person who begins at 40 and contributes consistently for 25 years still builds something real, still arrives at 65 with more than they would have had otherwise, still develops the habits and the identity and the relationship with money that this process quietly teaches. The starting point matters, yes, but the direction matters more than the starting point in almost every meaningful sense. The question was never, is it too late? The question was always, what does the next 20 years look like if I do this versus if I don't? Year 20. The account, at roughly 7% average annual growth, has historically grown to somewhere around $55,000 to $65,000 total on 240 months of contributions. The contributions themselves total $24,000. The growth, the silent, patient, unsexy accumulation of returns on returns, has more than doubled what you put in. But you've stopped thinking about it in those terms, mostly. The account is there. It does what it does. What you think about, instead, oddly, is what it represents, not the number. The fact that 20 years ago you made a decision that seemed almost too small to count, and it compounded, not just financially, but in your understanding of yourself, your decisions, your relationship to time. You're a different person, not because you have money, but because you spent 20 years practicing something that required you to believe in a future self before that self existed. That practice, invisible, unrewarded, mostly boring, shaped you in ways that reach far beyond an account balance. The most honest thing that can be said about all of this is that the money is almost secondary. The money is the proof of something, the evidence, but the thing being proven, the capacity to act on behalf of a future you haven't met yet, to hold a quiet conviction in the middle of years that offer no feedback, that's the real thing. And the strange part is that it doesn't take discipline, not permanently. It takes identity. It takes becoming, gradually and almost accidentally, someone for whom this is just part of life, not a victory every month, just a quiet given. $100, the same amount that disappears on a weekend without you feeling it, sitting in the right place, doing almost nothing, existing month after month, and across enough time, enough ordinary, unremarkable months, becoming something you cannot fully explain until you're living inside it. That's the thing most people don't realize, not the math, not the returns. The fact that the person who started, who kept going when nothing was happening, is genuinely not the same person who shows up at the other end. And maybe that was the point all along.